Hey everybody, we're on right now. I sort of thought that there was going to be the intro video that played, but it didn't. As you can tell, we're a little rusty on the live thing because we haven't been live for a few weeks, but we're back now. Myself, Curtis Childs, I'm the host. We're doing our question and answer shows. We've got our panel here. You can see Chelsea, co-writer with me on Swedenborg and Life, is going to be part of that. And then to fill out the panel, we have a couple of super esteemed guests, our friends of the show. We have Dr. Dan Sinisvet and... Sorry, I bumped your microphone. And then Jonathan Rose. And you can see there, Dan Sinisvet is a professor, associate professor of philosophy. Jonathan Rose is series editor. I'm not even looking at your things. I just remembered this. Is series editor of the New Century Edition translation of Swedenborg's works, and also budding musician. Am I right? Like we
budding.
I like you're just thinking about launching a music career, adding to your legacy. You dropped an album. Is this true?
I did. This is true. I'm a late bloomer.
Yeah, can we get a shot? There's the cover art. The album is called Clear Shining After Rain. You want to give us half a sentence about it?
Sure. This album aims to bring hope for the long-term future to people who, whether they're going through a difficult time personally or going through a difficult time being in this world, like our whole world is going through a difficult time. Yeah. So clear shining after rain.
And if that's not a good enough offer for all of you at home, we're going to throw in that Chelsea is on that album and a couple of tracks. I've heard them, and that's a Swedenborgian album.
Yeah, that's true. It is.
I mean, that's a very. I've listened. I know how to pick that stuff out. I mean, there's Swedenborgian stuff in there. So check that out if you know how to use the internet. And all right, enough about that. Let's get to the questions. This show is a celebration of the audience and how great you guys are, and we want to address what's on your mind. So let's see what you have to say. If you're watching, type your questions in. We'll get them. We take live questions on this show, and then that's how we get our material. So first question today is this from Brenda on Facebook. Through all my life in my religious studies, I had never even heard of Swedenborg until stumbling on him via Curtis on YouTube. I was godsmacked, speechless, and now I can't get enough. I can't be the only one this has happened to. I've been studying different religions since I was a child and so close to some 50 years now, and I'm just now hearing the name of Emanuel Swedenborg. So if I could ask Curtis anything, it would be of that nature. Why is the world in general just now hearing about him and his work? Which is the question anybody who's into Swedenborg asks themselves. Right? This is cool. You know, there are less cool things that get a lot more airtime than Swedenborg. So if you guys could, in a couple of sentences, succinctly wrap this up for us, why isn't Swedenborg bigger than he is? You want to start, Dr. Rose?
Sure. I think he's the most influential unknown person. One thing that happened over the history of the reception of his works was that in the 19th century, a number of new religious movements were started that had at least pieces of his teachings that were incorporated into their thing that became much better known than his original, work. But they left his name off for obvious reasons, because they weren't. That isn't what they were advertising.
Are we naming names? Like what religious?
I'd rather not.
Do we want to offend people? Okay.
And I'm not an expert in this area, but I understand there's a number of things in New Thought or Christian Science or even the Unification Church and even what's colloquially referred to as Mormonism and so on. Mm-hmm. There were a number of things that developed that had Swedenborg elements in them. Okay. Another piece that I would cite is that Swedenborg got very identified in the late 19th century with spiritism and seances and things like that. Right. And then in the early 20th century, when spiritism was kind of debunked and booed off the stage and seen as just people rapping on the bottom of the table, Swedenborg kind of went out with the bathwater, so to speak. Okay. And so for quite a while there, when there was a lot of materialism and existentialism in the 20th century, Swedenborg kind of disappeared from view for a few decades, and now he's on the rise again. Yeah,
it's kind of like The Darkness, the band. After hair metal came and went, but they made this resurgence. We're trying to do that for Swedenborg.
That's right. Okay. Well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to tack on to what Dr. Rose said he was fairly well known toward the end of his life in Europe, and after he went to the spiritual world, he was well known, and he was well known in the United States too, in the late 18th century, early 19th century. You have Emerson, and you have New England transcendentalism and things like that. So there's the new religious movements and spiritism that's negative from a Swedenborgian perspective, but there's also a tremendous growth in naturalism and materialism in the late 19th century through the early 20th century, and it's I mean, there's the sort of what they call the secularization thesis, which is as science and technology develop, people just turn away from religion and the spiritual world, and they're just more about being comfortable in the natural world. But there's been some research done that shows that secularization thesis, even if it's got some truth to it, is not the whole truth. There was actually a very intentional turning away from religion from about 1870 to 1930. Particularly among intellectuals and people who wanted to become professionals in journalism, in medicine, in education. Sociology, for example, is one discipline. Psychology was another one. And you can see this in Christian Smith's book. It's called The Secular Revolution, published by University of California Press, I think 2003.
It's a great press.
A very... so you've got the cultural elites who have the sort of commanding heights of what people are talking about and what's, if you want to put it this way, what's cool and what's not, what's acceptable socially.
Yes, we do have control of that.
Intellectually and what's not. And there's this massive turn away from anything spiritual, anything religious. And that really sinks a worldview like Swedenborg,
which kind of caters to people who are very educated in the first place, because you got to be pretty educated just to get your way into that forest of terminology. The salt in the wound is that Swedenborg was cooler a century ago, or whatever, more than a century ago than he is now. So Chelsea, you have some thoughts about the Swedenborg and his obscurity?
Oh, I just wonder why. I mean, the main obvious reason why anybody's hearing about them now is because of the internet and just the widespread connection that we can do live stream and YouTube, just all that whole phenomena is partly why. And I think maybe Swedenborg is bubbling up to the surface as much as it is. I think I'm just conjecturing. It's just that it's well suited to fitting in a lot of different conversations. It's sort of and that's something that sort of just the global conversation through the internet is interested in. It's just sort of so before, it's sort of hard to, people, like you said, he's sort of the most influential unknown person, is because it's hard to take Swedenborg and just making this big, huge thing that everybody's going to move towards, in terms of he's much more of his ideas can resonate with a lot of different viewpoints. So it's hard to push him down into this strict orthodoxy of something, it's more his teachings themselves sort of push up against being characterized in one way or another, because even as we experience in the audience of the show, people from so many different faith backgrounds can resonate with the ideas, and so I think that's suited to the kind of conversation around spirituality that we are interested in having today, that people were maybe less interested in the past.
Right, it doesn't lend itself to the us and them kind of thing.
Right.
And in my humble experience being on the web, trying to share Swedenborg with people, the problem is that he's just a very, very strange combination of flavors. That you're going to try to... He talks so much theology, Christian theology. He also tells you about the weird hats that spirits wear. He's also going to go on and on about love and wisdom and light and heat. It's very easy for him to rub people the wrong way. You just pick what you don't like and then you can throw them out. So who is really going to be primed to have this sort of Christian mindset, but I also want to talk about the spirits of the earths and the universe. It's just. But I do agree that the conversation. I mean, things that Swedenborg was saying back in his day, all faiths can be a path to heaven. Just the very, very universalist kind of stuff. now is more in vogue. But the answer is, I don't know. The answer is nobody tried hard before to get them out there, so we're trying hard. So I think we could
left it to us to have that fun.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of people try. You have Helen Keller was trying her heart out to get it out there. A lot of people really went for it, and he's had his ups and downs. But yeah, maybe it's just about the tools, the web, and the zeitgeist. If I haven't already used that word, it's
zeitgeist.
So I feel like we could do the whole hour on this, but we should probably move. Yeah, after what I was going to say is after your last comment, we should probably move
just
on.
Another phenomenon is even though naturalism grew very strong, and there was a reaction to that by people going back to, okay, we have to stick by the literal sense of the Bible, and of course if that goes against Swedenborg's view also. And so if you're not a kind of literalist, and if you don't believe these fundamental things, then you're a cult and New Church. I mean, you look at Kingdom of the Cults, which is a book, and you'll see Swedenborg is listed in there. And so he's too mystical to be a canonical scientist and philosopher.
That's right.
And he's too critical of traditional Christian theology to be one of us Protestants or Catholics.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he's too spiritual and the followers have been too small to be considered mainstream.
Yep.
And so it's this weird little marginal thing that is just totally dependent upon the Lord, seeing when the time is ripe.
That's what I was trying to say. All that stuff. He's too something for something.
Yeah.
And can I make one more very quick
Please
point?
Do. That's what I was going to say.
He was very, very famous in the late 19th century, especially in North America. Household name. Everybody, who's who. So if you study people from that time period, you bump into people who are reading Swedenborg. He was very influential then, but it's really true that it dried up later.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go to Chelsea.
It's sort of fun that it leaves us to do a lot of fun detective work. Like, it's kind of, since nobody's overtly has been like toting a Swedenborgian flag, really, because like you said, the sort of hard to categorize thing, it leaves a lot of interesting study to see where that influence has been. And recently I was reading about Christian missionaries in India in the after the East Indian Company or whatever, the British
East India Company,
being there. Just this one guy who was then influential to sort of Christian missions and stuff at that time was hugely influenced by Swedenborg, and even wrote to the Swedenborg Society at the time saying, why aren't you guys here? I'm hearing all this Christian stuff from everybody else, but why aren't you here? Because I love all these Swedenborg books that he just happened to find in somebody's library in England or something. And so it's just, you don't know where these, it's idea based, and I think that's what's internet friendly.
Yeah.
An idea based thing, not necessarily a label based
or the charisma based
thing.
Or
right.
whatever.
So
well, the good news is that he never really spread that much, because otherwise you'd have these like top tier people coming in to be Swedenborgians, but we get to do it.
That's right.
So all right, let's take our next question. Mary, can the bad spirits read our minds so as to mislead and sadden us, and also cause us to recall our own bad memories to make us miserable and depressed? And why would they want to do this? And so here you have, we said that Swedenborg goes into stuff like this, and does it. You can ask a question like this of Swedenborg's material, and you can get a specific answer on it based on his experiences. And I can't wait to answer it, but I want to hear what you guys have to say first, just in case it's better.
I'll throw a leading idea out there. This thought was floating in my mind recently about the influence of bad spirits. Basically, yes, Swedenborg does say they can read our minds. They can mislead and sadden us, and they can make us recall bad memories and mistakes we've made and everything. And they do very well, making us miserable and depressed. But an interesting rule about the way that they affect us in Swedenborg's theology is that they attack what we love. Mm-hmm. And so if you're feeling attacked, if you're feeling miserable about something and depressed and feeling like you're bringing up all these bad ideas, things, whatever from your past, it's because you have this love inside of you that they are getting really upset about. And so it's like, it's one of the most interesting kind of tricks I've found for my own life, is to realize if I'm feeling really hopeless about something in a moment, it's actually, in a weird sort of counterintuitive way, a sign that things are more hopeful than they seem, because there's this big love that's present there. So it seems a little bit hopeful. That's
I was just going to say, yes, one of the strengths of Swedenborg's spiritual experiences, I think, is that he enables you to understand what's going on in your own mind. Yeah. And you can be hit by a memory of some bad thing that you did when you were 12 years old, and you feel really guilty about that. And you feel really guilty about it, and you just think, where did that come from? Why? I wasn't even thinking about that.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue, exactly. And if it really is getting after you, there's an explanation for that. It's not you doing it to yourself. It actually is somebody else in the spiritual world who, unfortunately, really hates people, and is trying to find a way to grind you down. Right. And so they're spirits, but you have to just. It helps to know that they're actually people. They're minds. They're forms of consciousness, and just like people here when they're here on Earth, hate other people and just love to find ways to crush them and humiliate them, and if they can, just drain the life out of them. There are spiritual influences on us too that are actually trying to do the same thing, and it's kind of scary to read some of the things in the theological works about that, because I think there's an image in there about the Lord sort of builds a kind of dam around your mind, and that there's this flood waters of evil sort of pressing in upon it, but thank goodness for the angels and the Lord's power, because it's held back, and it's pretty controlled, and it's some stuff leaks through, but that's just to help you, give you something to work on, and strengthen those loves and increase your spiritual resilience.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the why, as to why, I agree with what's being said, and as to why, one thing is that just like in this world, as you were saying a moment ago, you can go to a party. There's just certain people you may know who just. They've got a hobby horse. They got a thing that they're negative about. They get onto their subject, and they just want to feed off it, and they want other people to feed off. They want to sort of, well, why don't we all complain about? Let's get in that mood. It's a very similar thing. The interesting wrinkle is that Swedenborg, by and large, in most of his passages, says that those evil spirits are not conscious of us. Like, they don't know personally who we are, or they would really turn up the heat and try to take us down. But I think it's sort of like they wander into your house. They don't know they're in your house, but they go, oh, here's something filthy. I love that. And they just drag stuff out of your memory without realizing exactly. It's not necessarily personalized, but they're very good at dragging up that memory, that random little thing that you feel it can be the smallest thing, but they'll bring it up for decades and just, well, what about that thing? And go over that again. And then another question is, why would the Lord, why would divine love and wisdom allow that to happen to us? It's a purification process, or it can be, where stuff is brought. If you didn't know it was there, you couldn't work on it or get rid of it. So he allows it to a point so that you can see what's going on inside yourself.
And it's, to me, a pretty murky picture in terms of what's really going on with you in the spiritual world, and do people know you're there? And because there's times when he says that there are spirits with us who, and this is like, why aren't people into Swedenborg? It's because it's weird. And here comes some more weird stuff. There are spirits with you who think that they're you, and they think that they're you because otherwise they would attack you. You know, they think that you share things. So are there other evil spirits coming and attacking those spirits, you know, that think that they're you and that's how they're attacking you? I don't know. And Swedenborg he sometimes says, oh yeah, the spirits don't know who you are at all. Other times he'll describe, like, particularly with the way spirits worked on him. He will describe in very acute detail. He'll say, oh, these spirits were mentioning particular people and watching how I reacted. Is it okay? We'll talk about this person. Okay, to find out who meant what to him, so they could manipulate him. They would pull up different subjects, and so I wonder if you have this spectrum of happy minds in this world to miserable minds, and is it like the people who are more assaulted by this kind of stuff on a regular basis? They're somehow more visible, and that's what, because you get to the point. We've done a couple of shows about people who are actively hearing voices, and very clearly somebody knows they're there, and I think it's like it's a gradient. You know, it's like there's a level of awareness. There's sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's not. So those are some confusing things.
I think there's a great truth in people have probably seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy. At least a lot of people have. And there's that great image in there that as long as the ring is not on the finger, those creepy guys can't see the Nazgul, can't see you.
Yep.
But you put it on, and then all of a sudden, they notice you and they're zooming in. Right. There's something about a certain kind of spiritual consciousness like Swedenborg had that I think brings them in a more specific way. And so Swedenborg emphasizes that he had to have divine protection in a more concrete way. So I think it probably does vary, but there's certain sort of things you can, you put the ring on and all of a sudden you appear in a different way to the more specifically.
Yeah, and I want to say two things. One is we got to move on because we've got. I'll let you go, but we're not quite there, but we're moving towards half an hour gone. And we've only done 2 questions, but I want to say. That we did 3 episodes on this topic. One is called How to Deal with Evil Spirits. The other is called How to Free Your Mind from Hell. And the third is called The Lies Evil Spirits Tell Us. Look up and watch those because they have a lot. They go into much more detail about your question. And then I'll let you finish it off.
Oh, just 2 quick things. One is the weirdness factor for me is mitigated the more I learn about the way things interact in the natural world.
Okay.
In a very organic, this needs this and that depends on that, and these systems are interdependent, and if you think from an ecological perspective, okay, and then transfer that to the conscious level or the spiritual level. And it's the same thing that's going on, actually, that all these things are actually organic in the sense that there are parts and aspects and they're all interrelated and interconnected, and one thing feeds off another, and sometimes it's kind of a vicious thing and other times it's virtuous, but it all is a ecosystem. So that's made it less weird for me. The other thing that I find very helpful is, so you get some depressing influence or thought or something like that comes in to your mind, and one thing that I find helpful that I've gotten from Swedenborg's theology is to not identify myself with it.
Definitely.
To say,
that's good.
No, I don't want to think about that, and that's not delightful. It's not something that is useful, and it's not very helpful or charitable that I dwell on this and focus on this. So I'm actually going to put it away for now and turn my attention somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm glad that we let you in there, because it is true. If we were trying to describe nature to someone who had never seen nature, it would be just, this is too stupid and weird. Like and even describe just human society to someone who don't, you wouldn't buy it. And I also do want to say what the game is. What I seem to feel like the game is in the mind is hell is trying to get you to say, you're being made miserable by realities. You're just realizing a fact about yourself.
Yeah.
You're just realizing a fact about life. That's what's leading to this misery. But I think that's a bunch of crap, because I think that these are tailored messages. Somehow they're coming through. They're tailored messages to get particular reactions. I mean,
spiritual spam, as you said.
Spiritual spam.
Yeah, I think it's that. And so the good news is evil and falsity are married. everything that's attacking you is got some false premise. Swedenborg had this great quote. He was talking to some evil spirits or angels or something, and they're like, all those ideas that you have used are true, but because you've used them to support a false premise, they're all false. Hell will use things that seem to be factoids, but they string them together in this monstrous way to try to paint a picture of reality to get you upset when that's not the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. It will not enslave you. So I broke the rule and I talked more on that one. Okay. Can we move on? Can we please move on? Okay, that's a great question. Florian, what are your thoughts about spirit communications? There are several books about it, and I find many similarities to what Swedenborg reported. So we didn't let you get a last word in there, Chelsea. Do you want to kick this one off?
Sure.
Here? What are your thoughts about spirit communication?
Spirit communications.
Or have you read any other who are those guys? Kardec, those other kind of guys.
I'm not very well read. I mean, other than sort of reading, things on like near-death.com, people's near-death experiences or spiritual experiences that way. But I guess there's so many levels of what you could mean, I guess, by spiritual communications.
Sure.
Or spirit communications, and certainly that would make sense if you're finding similarities to Swedenborg, because I think he paints a very broad and yet detailed picture of the way that we are, our whole sense of self and mindset, mm-hmm. everything that goes on in our mind is one giant spirit communication.
Yeah.
And yet it's not just sort of totally, a blur, like it's very specific.
Yep.
And we have,
right.
and we're all these unique individuals. And so there are spirits and angels on the other side. I think of spirit communications like angel guides or spirit guides, mm-hmm. is what that brings to my mind. And I think that, Swedenborg is clear that there is this level of support going on from angels and spirits for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody have more on that?
What it made me think of is, first of all, the question, which I suppose is true of any human interaction in this world as well, of what is the purpose on both parties' side, on the side of both parties. What's the purpose of the communication? So you don't know necessarily what the purpose is of the communication that's coming in. The people on that side are just like the people on this side. There's just all kinds of people. And Swedenborg explains that there are just millions and millions and millions of spirits, just from this planet, 55 million new ones every year. There's just there's tons of them. And so there's a huge range, unlimited range of different people. Some people are just, sort of horsing around or something like that. Some people are really devious, and some people really have high, beautiful, amazing, altruistic goals, and they have different reasons for communicating. So trying to ascertain what the purpose is from the other end, and then what your purpose is in listening to it or in engaging in the conversation. I think one reason that Swedenborg had the protection that he had was that he got really clear from the beginning about why he's doing. This is not for fun at a party or something like that. He's got a purpose. He needs to understand heaven and hell. He needs to describe those things to people, what the future life is like and all that. And so he's a man on a mission, and he's going to find something out. And I think that protected him, as opposed to the type of thing we've talked about sometimes before on the show, of the kind of Ouija board thing where this is fascinating, or whatever. But it's, what's your purpose in doing that?
Certainly.
Is it entertainment? Are you seeking an answer? So the purpose on both sides is an important factor.
Yeah. I recently watched a TED Talk where there was a woman who had a really horrible experience. She went to France as a teenager and was attacked by these two guys because she was very naive about they're just like, oh, follow me over here, so the spiritual world is like, you just can't go to a foreign city and not know what you're doing, so it's like
just go
similar kind of thing of like there are, you could end up running into some very nice people, you could end up running into some not nice people. So anyway, did you have some further thoughts?
Because I in philosophy class, one of the worldviews or philosophies of life that we look at is the New Age, and of course generally speaking, the New Age is pretty open to communication between people on this level and people on other levels or other dimensions. So we actually look at some passages where Swedenborg addresses this. Mm-hmm. And he's quite open in saying that, if you really manage to quiet your body and, quiet the outside world, really get rid of a lot of stimulation from your five senses, your consciousness changes. I mean, we know this through sensory deprivation experiments in psychology and things like that too. There are different aspects of your mind that you become aware of and that also open up. And Swedenborg says that, even in deep meditation and prayer, we can sometimes appear in the spiritual world to spirits there, and they can appear to us. And that's descriptive. But then he has what I would call a normative, or a sort of, here's the watch out for this part where he, this is the part where he says, well, but really you should be really very, very careful about trying to contact people or trying to get in touch with spirits, because it can be dangerous. You can be unprepared. If they communicate with you, that's different. It can be different because sometimes it's just unbidden, and it can be a real gift. It can happen in dreams, or it could happen even in kind of wakeful states. But I think his overall point is pretty consistent with some teachings in Scripture about don't try to become master of consciousness and the universe and get into different forms of magic and things like that, because you're headed down a bad road.
I remember he has this like I think it's in his journal of spiritual experiences. It says sometimes people who live apart from other people will occasionally hear the voices of spirits, and that's fine as long as they. So he obviously there's a lot of different circumstances, and his whole story was of spirit communication leading to what he believed was a very high good, and also he's describing the spiritual world in 1750s and 60s and 70s. Right. His spiritual world was very dynamic. The sphere of what kind of spirits could get at who was locked away, who was out. It was always changing, and he said during his writing it changed. Is it a friendlier place now than is there more order there? I think about like Times Square in New York City in the 80s was very different than it is now. Is it a different sort of thing? Yeah. So that's a question, and I generally assume a lot of good stuff is going on. People talk about this contact with this spirit is helping. So I'm like, that's probably good. It's probably your so and so. I also though do see. I sort of feel like Swedenborg was a meta communication. He would not just communicate with spirits, but he would learn the wider tendencies. He said spirits lie. Like they love to just talk like they know about things when they don't know about anything. He'll describe things like people were in communities, get brought into communities in the spiritual world, and they think that they've always known what they learned there, even though the knowledge just came to them. And I sometimes see echoes of that in other people's stuff. So he'll even give you like a step back of here's why spiritual experiences feel the way they do.
Yeah, something on the YouTube channel and also on the Heaven and Hell Facebook page, we get a lot of people asking about, how can I communicate with spirits? Right. How do I communicate with the spirits that are with me? If they are all with me, why aren't I talking to them more often? And one of the main sort of exercises or things that I think is like in line with what Swedenborg is, his whole understanding of the way the spiritual world works is to pay attention to how you're feeling. And that like our thoughts and our feelings are both a part of the spiritual world, and I think we can actually get more clarity about what kind of spirit communications we're having, or associations, as you might call them, based on what feeling is dominating in you at one time. And then learning how to try to shift that feeling is really sort of relocating yourself to a new spiritual society that you're communicating with. So paying attention to how that feeling is another way of...
Right. And I feel like it's sometimes this seems obscure, the idea of their spirit communication and their societies, your mind. Other times to me, it's like that is as clear as day in my mind. Like I just changed neighborhoods, like, or I just I just walked by a conversation and this thing popped in. Like sometimes to me, it's like, wow, that is exactly he tells it. It goes back and forth. She had something really important.
One tacking is just like, I just recently read that's something in Divine Providence, Swedenborg talking about what inner enlightenment from the Lord is like. And he says it's the first thing you sense upon hearing, what somebody else is saying, of whether it's true or not. The first sense of it. Right. And he does talk about how like the heaven, higher level of heaven, the celestial heaven is all based on feeling and this. So it's you can almost, they don't even talk about things very much because they're just aware of the feeling of it. So it's a different way of communicating, but very real. I do, and that kind of applies to the previous question about evil spirits messing with you and that kind of thing, and what you were saying about what I know when I'm, regardless of the ideas that are triggering, when I'm feeling under attack, that's the attack, because the thoughts will try to cloud things of like, oh, there's no attack here. Right. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Just one quick thing about back to the purpose that I was talking about before, is that I thought I should specify what I think a good purpose is, like as a general yardstick, purpose beyond yourself. You're trying to heal somebody, you're counseling somebody, or you're trying to develop a plan for an organization that's moving forward. I say, like you've got some useful, it's not, just about, self-centered things, or particular things of the lower self. Like, I'm craving this, I want this, that's, it's the big picture stuff, the thing that's good for the whole human race. That kind of stuff is the highest purposes for that communication.
Nice. That's a good note to end on. Let's get to our next question, because we got to keep rolling here. Zeke, what does Swedenborg say about suicide? Can I say something first about this one? He doesn't say that much about it. We made a short video about Do Suicides Go to Hell? It was called, and it wasn't even really based on his stuff about suicide. It was based on his larger principles about what determines your eventual spiritual fate, and that this is, there are doctrines that will say you commit suicide, you go to hell, right? It's as simple as that. But Swedenborg, throughout his entire corpus, is saying where you go in the afterlife is based on your ruling love, the things you cultivate over a lifetime. It's not one particular act that sends you there or not sends you there. The only times I know of him talking about suicide, in the spiritual experiences, he talks about someone who had killed himself with a knife and they can't seem to throw the knife away because it lingers with you for a long time. It's not like you're not going to get some kind of solution to your problems by killing yourself, because those problems remain on the other side. But as far as I know, he doesn't say a lot. But do you guys have anything further? Yeah.
Well, he says that spirits press in sometimes. Like the evil spirits will press in sometimes.
Oh, right.
And really try to get you to think about that. He had somebody who he hadn't even known. He figured it out later that it was a woman who was interested in him or something like that, and then got so mad at him when he wasn't interested in her. And after she died, she would obsess him. So every time he saw a knife, she would be like, "Stick it in yourself! Stick it in yourself!"
Yes.
And he wouldn't do it. But it was very interesting that those kind of thoughts. Again, he had to be clear that that's not coming from myself. He didn't know at first where it was coming from. I think it even predated his spiritual experience to some extent, that he would have this urge, and then he found out, oh, that's what that is, weird thing. I get around a knife and I get weird, because I get these thoughts and stuff. And I do believe sometimes they get so powerful that people are, like losing free will or something like that, So I think you can have compassion for people who go through that, because it's not like they were sitting there, for most people, calmly, rationally, and they decide, this is what I'm going to do. I think it's something pressing in so hard.
Right.
Wanting to take him down. And from my standpoint, it's sort of a stupidity on hell's part, because it's sort of like the vines that kill the tree they're climbing on. Like, now you just, why? It seems dumb. It's like self-defeating, like a virus that kills the host. And stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I would just say that there are also natural causes for just like there are natural causes for people dying of heart attacks or strokes or whatever, there are natural causes for people committing suicide too. I mean, there's, electrochemical imbalances in your brain, and no matter how hard you think positive thoughts, you just can't overcome them because you don't have the right chemistry in your body. And it's not something that you are morally responsible for. I mean, they're just, if you can never figure it out and you go to a doctor and the doctors can't figure it out and you end up taking your own life, I don't think the Lord is going to say, well, you should have passed that high school chemistry or college chemistry class and you could have,
Yeah.
He's not going to say that.
Right.
He's going to say, wow, that is really unfortunate. And I have total mercy and love for you.
Right.
That's right.
And once you're free of the body and the natural body, I should say, and you come into your spiritual body, which does not depend upon natural biochemistry, you'll be free of that stuff. And then you'll be able to think rationally and really be clear about what you love to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I appreciate Swedenborg's perspective on understanding the way that the spiritual world influences the way our mind works to get a kind of freedom from our own mind.
Yeah.
Which I think, even that whole, the language around people committing suicide is this sense of intentionality and as if they're free and rational in their minds when they're making this choice to take their own life. And it's like suicide, we understand more and more, is a product of, could be biochemical, imbalances, but also just different, whatever levels of mental illness might be going on. And so then that, through Swedenborg's understanding of the way the spiritual world works, being able to understand that, these thoughts of wanting to end my own life is not coming from me, and they're probably coming from a source that is completely has my interests at the bottom and their own interests, above that. And it's amazing, I feel like, hearing about from people from so many different walks of life that we all can share. Like, I've heard people mention that, like, you're walking along a subway and you just get the thought, oh, jump down right before the subway comes.
Yeah.
Like the number of people who probably have this like strange sudden little impulse of like, where did that thought come from, to like push that person in front of the, to realize we're actually a part of this super broad spiritual milieu of just like suggestions that are for somebody else's gain, is helpful. And I guess the one other thought along those lines, which I think you guys touched on anyway, but is the way that Swedenborg says how we are held accountable for our actions that we've done with rationality. If we have impaired rationality, there's a cushion there of all right, we need to work through this and get to a greater understanding where then you can be rational and make choices. So
and freedom too.
And freedom, right.
Right.
So
I was listening to some interview on the radio. I forget now what it was, but somebody was telling the interviewer that they're afraid of bridges, and it's not because they're afraid of heights, but they're, as she described it, I'm so impulsive that I feel like I might just jump off. Like, where is that coming from? Okay, let's do our next question. This is Deborah. Why doesn't God make or allow himself to be known to us, or does he only exist in the way that it feels he exists in heaven, up there, and not with us? So why is it all so cryptic? All right, you guys are going to come here and tell me, it's awesome. There's God. God is like total love, and God is super present. But if you had the day I had today, where's God? So I'm interested in what's the answer to this question.
I'm diving in again. This is I feel like this is the fun train of thought that I have, where the line I have comes from an Indian writer, but it's God is within you as you. Is the line. And then, but that's a very Swedenborgian concept, or something that rings true with what Swedenborg writes about how, like, the purpose of creation is to have these beings that feel to themselves to be completely their own unique person that has freedom and rationality. And so God loves to experience life through us. And so often that is when, so we feel like God isn't there, because if we were aware of God's presence, we wouldn't feel free. But that's part of the the intentionality that God has around all of our existence is just getting to experience life as our own.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a whole show about that called
Is it The Infinite in
The
You?
Infinite in You.
Yes. Go check it out. Okay. Other answers?
Well, I would just say that I think there are times in life, times in my own life, when it's felt like God is up there somewhere and distant. And we actually had a question about how do I turn my spirit toward God, or and just how do I connect? And one way is to read sacred scripture and try and listen for God, and also try and feel God too. And I find the Psalms are particularly good for that, as well as the Gospels, the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's more of a feeling there than it's just the ideas. But there are other times too when, and I think Swedenborg attests to this more than me, but I think there are times in my life, both good times and crisis, when I have felt God right there with me. It's not just, he's up in heaven and he's sort of this big supervisor up there with the general managers. He's out in Irvine, California, and here I am and on the East Coast.
The flights are super expensive.
And he's got the manager's 10 levels down, sort of keeping an eye on things, and he's minding the general store. No, I mean, he's really been there right with me, and in surprising, amazing ways. I mean, even to the point of, I'm just going to turn to you, Jonathan, for a second, of even going like this. Not a physical touch, but just this sphere on my right shoulder. Really, that specific. So, and it was completely unbidden by me. Although what was going through my mind was, this is such a hard time right now. Are we ever going to get through? And there was this sphere right on my right shoulder, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Right shoulder correspondences.
That's right.
Okay.
So anyway, there.
Power of love.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan.
Scripture, I think, is scriptural answers to this great question. It's such an awesome question and so fundamental to human existence, I think, to ponder this. Scripture says somewhere in Isaiah, I think, you are a God who hides yourself. I think that is so interesting, and I think that is something, and it's pretty hard, when you're infinite, it's hard to hide yourself, It's a good trick, but somehow he managed to hide himself. But when I look at Scripture, when I look at Jesus in the New Testament, when I look at the angels, Jesus knows who Nathanael is before he sees him. He's able to describe his character and everything from a distance. He knows what people are thinking. All the Pharisees, all the time he's calling them out. Hey, you're thinking this. Or they'll say, hey, you're thinking this. And the angels who come down, they know who's pregnant. They know what the baby's all about. They have tremendous information about us. And so although I don't feel every day as I'm walking through my life like, some divine presence, has the total file on me. I see that in Scripture, and there are times when I feel that, and when I realize it's fun to look in my life sometimes and see ways that I think the divine sense of humor is sort of winking at me, where there are certain jokes that happen that I'm the only one who knew that joke. You know what I mean? Like this happened, and then that person walked out, and then another person walked in and said that thing. And I'm the only person who knows those two things happened. And it was hilarious, that juxtaposition. And I'm the only, so it was a little joke just for me.
Yeah.
There were little things like that, and more significant things, like the very touching what you said about the shoulder and everything, that where you realize that the Lord is there. Years ago, I heard this guy, I was in the room with him, and he was telling this story about how he was in utter despair, and he was walking through these woods by himself, and he said to God, if you exist, I just need a sign. If you exist, just, do something. I'm just desperate here. And he said, and I had no reason to disbelieve him, that he felt a tap on his shoulder as he's walking through the woods. And there was a cat on a branch that he walked underneath, and the cat taps him on the shoulder while he's walking by, and he just about falls over. It's like, whoa, And I have an experience one time like that when I was in a state of despair and just said, Lord, are you there, or something like that. And this bird came and banged on the window just again and again, bang, 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 for like an hour, bang, bang, bang. And I was like, okay, I get it. I think there is something. The Lord doesn't want to scare us, and sometimes we're freer from him than we are to experience him or something like that in the short run. But I think he's very gentle in the way that he brings his presence, not too overwhelming into our lives.
Yeah. From what I gather from Swedenborg, our current situation is sort of like if everybody was blindfolded and we're all walking through life and we're like, I keep bumping into things. It's hard for me to know if this is really Jonathan I'm talking to. Why, it just seems like we're missing a sense. Yeah, he says that the way humanity was designed, we're supposed to have this open communication with heaven. It was supposed to be not like, here's God, you felt God. And it can be a searingly painful experience to be somebody who is affirmative toward the idea of God, and you're saying, I need help, will you help me? And you don't get anything.
That's
right.
right.
And I've had that a decent number of times.
Me too.
To the point where it's like, I'll hear about like near-death experiences, and or somebody says I was an atheist, but then I was finally like, okay, God, if you're there, and you get this, and I'm like a little like, I wish that I was like that high on the priority list, because it's very, very painful to not get there, and there's just some mechanical separation, and I think that everybody describes, if you've had your near-death experience or you're a Swedenborg kind of guy, as soon as we're out of the physical thing, you're right there. Like okay, it's not a game, but the simulation or something is over. Now we can give you everything. Angels give you everything you need. God is right there. God is tangible. But for some reason, it's very sparingly doled out in this life. Mm-hmm. So I have no like warm fuzzy ending point to that. But I do want to say that there is a way to like duct tape something together to get back there, I think, and it's through ideas. That Swedenborg says, this light that we're seeing from these lights is a living picture of God. You people are images of God.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Everything in here is somehow an image and likeness of God. We just don't quite know how to read it. And that part of Swedenborg's mission was, I'm going to tell you guys how to do it. And I just like barely start to piece things together. I was on vacation and I was walking up these dunes, and I saw this tree that was growing straight up. And to me, in that moment, it was very clear. The trunk is love, and the branches, these are like the ideas. And if the trunk is straight up, then so it just was very like, this is alive. But other times, you don't see anything like that. So I do wonder if through a Swedenborg kind of thing, we can kind of, kind of like, people like coat hanger their antenna. Like we can get this communication that we lost.
Yeah.
And that hopefully with his new church, with this future of Swedenborg is predicting, we're going to move back into that communication with God. We got to do more questions.
Mm-hmm. Can I just have one quick thing?
Last time it turned out.
There is a philosophical problem and debate right now in the philosophy of religion. It's called the problem of divine hiddenness. Mm-hmm. And there's a big debate between philosophers. The one side saying divine hiddenness counts in favor of atheism.
Interesting, right?
If we can't see God, if He doesn't show Himself, etc., then there isn't one, and that's why And then there's the other side. This is no, He's there, but He's there in a very sophisticated way. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of philosophical point I want to make. Then there's what I would call the existential or the life point, which is, there's the, well, why don't you show yourself to me? Which, yes, but then there's also the, it reminds me of when, the time when I had a problem with depression, and I wondered why. My wife was so cold to me. Yeah. And it was she was hidden to me, but it was actually my issue, not hers.
Right.
So there's that dynamic between us and God too.
Right. So we got to show ourselves to God as well.
That's right.
Let's look at another one. This is from Zelda. Are there women and children angels? The Bible talks about strong men that were angels, not women. Okay. The question is clear. The answer is clear. Well, according to Swedenborg, what is it? Are there lady and children angels?
Yes. Angels, Swedenborg says, are all ex people. There's no separately created race of genderless beings up there.
Right.
They're all ex people. And so everybody who dies in this world, male, female, young, old, they all roll into that other world. And particularly the children have a very high rate of going to heaven. Like Swedenborg says, there's 100% below a certain age kind of thing. And
which is pretty decent.
So yes, there's a whole massive part of heaven that's devoted to the children who died and became these amazing angels in the highest heaven and stuff that he talks about. And yes, he talks about male and female, and he sees lots and lots of angel women who are just amazing. Their wisdom is amazing, and their insight and everything that he talks to. So, yes, they are. And some of it is a translation problem, which is that in the Greek, the word for angel is grammatically masculine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that was biologically masculine. So often the translator will put a masculine pronoun on an angel that might have been or whatever.
That's
so
right.
It's true. There's sort of a tilt in there sometimes in the translation, but in Swedenborg's heaven, and I'd like to go to his heaven.
Yeah.
I think that's a more interesting heaven with a couple of different genders and some cute kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Kids aren't so bad.
yeah.
Okay. More expansion? Okay, that's good. That's good, man. Let's go to the next question. Potter, I have Asperger's, a kind of autism. This has effects on me, negative and positive. Would I still have it in the spiritual world? How would that affect me when some of these quirks feel like me? That's a great question, Potter. So it's not, because we could say, if somebody, like my leg doesn't work, your leg will work in heaven. Right. But, what if someone says, wait, this is not just a problem that's got to get fixed. This is a part of who I am. So, what do we want to say to Potter about that?
Just yesterday evening, I watched the Temple Grandin movie again, and was thinking about this very point about Temple Grandin was so shaped by her autism, you know what I mean, and she became this amazing person and everything. But would you take that autism away or something like that? I think I've thought before that our lives in this physical body are like pouring. The spirit is very malleable, and so in the flesh we have kind of this. You pour this. It's like the boards for pouring a foundation. So you set up the boards, you pour spirit in there, and then it gets set in concrete in a certain way. Then you build this whole spiritual house on top of it, and you take the boards away. Now, so the question is autism a board or is it part of the concrete?
Right.
I think what the Lord is particularly interested in is how we deal, because we've all got a syndrome, even if it's your own idiosyncratic thing or whatever, we've all got something interesting. There are no normal people or something. And how do we bounce off of that thing, and how do we work with it, and how do we bless others? What compassion does it give us for others, and so forth? I think it's an amazing time now where autism is being viewed in such a more positive light. I've read things about how employers are getting much more interested because autistic people in the workplace are often extremely loyal, and the attention to detail is amazing. Yeah. So seeing it more as a gift, rather than just, well, you're not exactly like me or something, and trying to value that. So I love that. Like there's got to be a usefulness or a reason or something that the Lord can make out of that. But it is a very interesting question. I would tend to think that your basement would always have been poured in that autistic, like that's part of what shaped you. But there's no limit to what can go on that foundation.
On top of it.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a limitation. It's a blessing. Swedenborg also talks about how the light shines through the clouds. We're like the clouds, and then the Lord's light shines through. It creates this unbelievable rainbow. And so I think, the Lord can shine through that, no problem whatsoever. Right. So those are the answers that come to mind.
Great.
Can I just add one?
Yeah.
Well, two things actually.
Please.
One is something that I've really gained from my wife, who she's the director of student support at Bernathen Church Elementary School. So she works with students who have special needs, and the important thing to remember is that we're people first. We're fundamentally our loves, our thoughts, our intentions, our deeds, and those don't always express themselves in the natural world the way we would hope. Most inwardly desire.
Right.
And so people have incredible depths to them, and you might not ever know it because either the social circumstances just don't permit them to say or do what they would like to do, and I'm presuming good things here, or there's something organic, again, brain chemistry or brain structure or neurons or whatever. Again, it's just holding something back in there, but that doesn't mean it's not in there. Mm-hmm. There are fascinating psychological case histories where something will happen to somebody, and all of a sudden, something organic will change, and then you find out, there's all these things going on. This person was thinking this and feeling this, and so there's that thing to remember. There's still a person there fundamentally, and there's all sorts of things going on in there. So I wouldn't want to say, well, this is how I am now, and I'm really associated with this thing and this label, and that's it. There's a lot more there, and the other important thing is fundamentally it's what a person wants. What do you desire, and do you hope to work on some good thing? Some people I know are very quiet and withdrawn and more toward the introvert psychological spectrum, and they find that that's actually quite useful. It's useful for them as an individual, and it's useful for other people. Not everybody, society wouldn't work if we were all extroverted, really extroverted. Right. And there's been some interesting books that come out lately now on the importance of having a balance of extroverts and introverts, and how teachers in American society in particular can cultivate introverts and help them. And so, it depends on what that person wants and what they find useful. It could be that some people really struggle with connecting to other people, and they would like to do more of it and be more expressive and so on. And once they're freed of natural world limitations, that will come out, I bet, in the spiritual world. Right.
Absolutely. Chelsea, do you have any further thoughts?
Mostly just echoes of what these guys have already said, of just it seems like our time in this world is sort of to this vehicle of our figuring out who we are and what we want to be, and like it seems like it's training a level of intention and intentionality about what we want to identify ourselves with and what we want to choose not to. So whatever whatever hand you were dealt, that sort of process seems like a parallel one. And it brought to mind the question just before about children in heaven, because when we were working on the show, Children in Heaven, I think was the title, I was so fascinated to hear about how even children who didn't live to be rational or have any sort of sense of, autonomy maybe in their life in this world, and yet they are raised in the spiritual world, and when they reach an age of rationality, they were, even though they live in heaven, they were then let down into their inherited evils that they had from their parents, from their heredity, and had to deal with this love of adultery and all this stuff that obviously they had no exposure to that in heaven, but it was purposefully that they were let down into it to feel that impairment, that part of them, that they could then navigate that, because it's so crucial to developing who you really are choosing to be, in the Lord and your path with the Lord. And the only other part is just sort of awe and wonder about the path that the Lord is leading all of us on. We always think we know who we are, and then 10 years down the world, you wouldn't recognize yourself. You could have never predicted that you'd be the person that you are then, than you were before, and that's just going to continue. So it's like,
God's
got a pretty good setup
You have no idea what's going to stay, what turns into what it corresponds to, and we have no idea. So that would be a good place to end it all. But I think that clock is like 16 minutes fast. So we're going to do one more question, just because we have only gotten to a few. If you guys don't mind, let's take a look at one more just to fill that out. But in the meantime, I did have a few thoughts on that question, which is that I saw a documentary where a guy hit his head in a pool. This was a guy who was a very sports-oriented gentleman, perhaps a jock you would call him, a certain kind of guy. He was going to catch a football in a pool, and he hit his head on the bottom of the pool, and he came out of that a fluent musician. He like his whole demeanor changed. He like started wearing different kinds of bracelets and stuff, and he like got really good at piano. He could like see these boxes in his head that let him play piano. There's another guy in that same documentary who was really, really good at math, and he said everyone has this capability, but it's just latent. I know Swedenborg talks about people coming into the spiritual world and they can speak much better than they ever could before, and they can think much more clearly. Yes, that's right. So what is a generalized upgrade that everybody gets? What are the specific upgrades that we don't know? And generally the problem is usually everyone telling each other, this is what's wrong with you, this is what's right with you. But as Swedenborg says, nobody, not even an angel, can know all the different ways that the Lord leads people. So, okay.
Can I react also to that? I just thought that was such an awesome question, and I wanted to express compassion for just about the difficult stuff involved with Asperger's and so on. And also just thinking generally about how the Lord brings us through our pain and suffering and is developing things in us. And I thought about the quirks that the writer expresses being part of themselves, that I think really it's so much about our heart. If there's something that just drives you nuts and you never liked it, I don't imagine the Lord, like, what would be the point? You wouldn't keep that. But if there's something that you really feel like, no, I live inside this. That's part of me. That's part of my unique thing. Yeah. I just think the Lord would, that the Lord is in that, or something, right. That you would have that trait. And it sounds like all of us after we die have sort of, it's like you were saying, can't shake the knife and stuff, like it's just, you've got this habit or whatever. Right. And there's just, are you willing to let go of that? Right. Or are you keeping that, and right. There's sort of a process that we go through like that. So perfect. Those are some additional thoughts.
So interesting. Reminds me of when a baby's born, they'll hold the same position that they did when they were in the womb for a while until they can learn to extend their limbs. And I just feel like in a way we're all just sort of cuddled up. We don't really know. We haven't fully developed, but we're gonna expand in ways that we have always had, but didn't have the chance yet.
Babies are cute. Okay. Very last question. This one is gonna fly by.
How do you know?
What does it mean if you've seen and felt your silver cord? Oh, good, because I don't know anything about this one.
Swedenborg talks about cords,
okay, then hit me with it.
No, I mean, I guess the first thing that jumps to mind is in one passage he talks about a cord that connects you to your spiritual home. I feel like, is this ringing bells?
Yeah, a little bit, yep. Okay, well, so we got our cord. It's not going to help us with this silver cord that you're talking about is a common occurrence in near-death experiences or other out-of-body experiences, that there's something attaching you to the body, that when you go out, you can sort of feel this cord. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, great. This is a good one to end.
Sorry.
I'm curious, because I don't... I've heard Swedenborg talk about a cord that's connecting you to your spiritual home, but this is something that people talk about as if it's what's rooting you in your physical body.
Well, I'm just going to say what I think I've heard about
I
it.
remember reading about
this. This is like it connects you to your spirit, and when you get to the end of it, you're drawn back in, or those kinds of things. So I don't know. This is a great one to end on because I don't know what that cord means. And what does Socrates say?
Wisdom consists in admitting your own ignorance.
That's it. So we're going to admit that pretty hard
Well, do
here.
you have, yeah, what's the thought?
I have
you
something
ruined my
Oh,
actual-
sorry.
Well, we can.
I'm ruining the thing. But I do remember reading near-death experience, now that you mentioned, of this kind of bond that exists between the body and the spirit.
Oh, yeah.
It is really amazing how if you were going to, what would you use to attach your spirit to your body? Don't they have that in Peter Pan where he loses his shadow? You're trying to get that thing
Get it on with
reattached.
glue.
Well, imagine if you lost part of your spirit, super glue or gorilla glue. What would you use to attach it? Swedenborg talks about the fact that he could feel this when he had the death experience, near-death experience. I think is when he mentioned it, that he could feel this amazing attraction for, there's such a powerful attraction from the Lord that even if your body was, blown to bits in a plane or something like that, the Lord could draw all those pieces together and make you whole and pull that in. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to think of something kind of going the other way, attaching the spirit to the body. And making it all attached. Swedenborg does say that our bodies are an image of our souls, in the sense that if there's anything in the body that is not attached to your soul, it dies. It just dies, and goes away. So whatever's living is a picture of your soul. So your soul is in that whole thing. And so it reminds me, it's interesting, the umbilical cord, it seems like a spiritual umbilical cord or something like that. As for what does it mean if you've seen and felt it, in a general response, I think spiritual experiences are so cool, and it's great that the Lord showers these things on different people to have had an experience. I think still what I feel moved to say is just the most important thing is compassion and people helping each other and so on. There's been times in my life where I've had special experiences and I felt like, oh, well, now I'm I'm singled out. I had this special experience, or I'm special, or something like that. Well, Swedenborg sort of took me down a peg in one passage where he said that it's no great shakes to have a spiritual experience. Even Balaam's donkey had a spiritual experience. So I think he was having to deal with that himself, because I think he was feeling some pride about he was having just these amazing spiritual experiences every day. And I think it was sort of like, well, hey, hold the phone. I mean, that's something that the Lord shares with all different kinds of people. I'm not saying it isn't great and very cool and very useful. It's useful information, especially when you share it with others. In and of itself, there's more than simply that's needed.
He's like, I'm having these experiences. They're so awesome that someday they're going to make a low budget web show. Me.
And I can't wait to see who's on.
Okay, Chelsea, you had one last thought.
Yeah. How often do you get to think about these things? I haven't heard about the silver cord thing, but as far as the usefulness of, it reminds me of the importance of our physical embodiment. I do think that there are spiritual traditions that have been and continue to be where they think it's all about getting out of your body.
That's true.
Let's just ditch this natural world and, get away from this physical earthly experience. Once I can have enough of that up here experience, off in the ethers or something, then that's enlightenment. And, and I would say that whatever this silver cord experience is, when I was, speaking of experiences that we've had, when I was young, I remember distinctly having this feeling like I was way too easily able to leave my body, and that I had to get this sense of you are going to get rooted down into this body and stay there. You need to, it felt like a condensing of earth, and my mind just had to go sort of dark. I had to sort of, I don't know how old I might have been. I feel like it was, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 or something like that. And just this distinct sense of this is going to feel heavy, but here it goes, kind of a thing. It was and you're going to stay like this. And my reflection since then is just that, the usefulness of, we're speaking of the hiddenness of God, we're meant to forget, there's a usefulness to being here, having this very, firm experience. And so I don't know if I've experienced the silver cord thing, but if you're doing a whole lot of leaving your body, it makes sense that your body would be wanting to, for spiritual reasons, hold you here, root you back down.
We got work to do here.
Here's a quick tie into your show.
Sure.
Recently read a book, the second edition of On the Internet. by the philosopher Hubert Dreyfus. And he talks about, are we going to be able to do a lot of disembodied things?
Right.
By,
once you have virtual reality.
Second life, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And he goes back to some continental philosophers, Merleau-Ponty and Kierkegaard and some others, to talk about that sense of groundedness. And why do we have a body? And what are the advantages of having a body? Okay, there are limitations, but there are also advantages. And even if you could send smell over the internet and current taste and some other things,
body thing, yeah.
And he says there's still things that you would miss, so it really got me. And so he comes back around to, so you're still going to need to have at least some of the time real people next to real people in RL, real life.
Yep.
And right next to each other, doing things with their bodies, and it just sent me back to a string of passages in Swedenborg where he talks about the spiritual body and how different that is from some other philosophers, particularly Christian philosophers, who tend to a more what you might call a Platonic view of, well, we're just going to be these disembodied minds. Mm-hmm. And that'll be great because we won't have to deal with the body. And Swedenborg I double checked and went to the Latin, and no, it really is spiritual body.
Right.
You're going to have a spiritual body. Like you said, it's going to be an upgrade. It's going to work much better.
And it's a rooting thing. Like it roots us in the spiritual world as well.
But it really is a body. I mean, it's a human body, and that human body corresponds with all these other things and the grand man of heaven and all this. So, but it's one of these interesting, unique things that we're now in our postmodern way sort of playing around with.
Yes.
Kind of disembodiment to a certain extent, which is kind of spiritual, but then we also do need our bodies.
So you tuned in, and what you got was a confirmation that it's good to have a body. It's good that we're walking in these things. So if you enjoyed that as much as we did, then please like this video and subscribe, because that's just the right thing to do. Well, it's good for us anyway if you do that. And since we're not getting any checks cut from the Human Body Society, we need donations. So check out our video. This is a little bit of what we do and why we need your support.
We want the ideas and insights we cover to be available for free to anyone, anytime they need them. That's why we offer Swedenborg's books as free downloads on Swedenborg.com, and we produce this show and other content on our Off the Left Eye YouTube channel with no paywall or ads. The only way to keep this up, though, is for those of you who like what we're doing and feel comfortable giving, to give. If the idea of helping others have easy access to the content we produce feels meaningful to you, please consider supporting this cause with a donation. Give if you can, receive if you need. If we cycle through this way, in the end, everybody wins.
That's our show for this week. I want to thank the whole panel. It was awesome to get to speak with you and hear what you had to say. It was enlightening to me to be here, and I want to thank the audience because just hearing your questions actually teaches me, because this is, I never really did think about that. I'm learning from that. So that's cool. Everything is cool. We hope you'll join us next week. We're going to be looking at the end times and Jesus Christ, and is the world about to end? Don't you want to know the answer? We'll tell you next Monday. We'll see you then.